Welcome to the Sisters in Service podcast. My name is Kat Corchado. I'm a fellow Air Force veteran who, after 20 years of active duty, struggled with transition after leaving service. The Sisters in Service podcast is a platform to include all women veterans, organizations, military spouses, and Blue Star, Gold Star families in talking about the trials and triumphs we face while in service and after service. A new episode will be released every Tuesday, and I hope that you'll take a listen. And if you like it, you'll share, leave me a review, or even let me know what subjects you would like to hear, especially if you're a woman veteran. And so thank you so much for those that have listened in the past. And thank you so much for following me on this journey as I continue with podcasting. Take care. Welcome to episode 52 of the Sisters in Service podcast. My name is Kat Corchado, and my guest today is Jen Zappone. She is currently living in New Mexico, which, let me backtrack a second. When I looked at her bio, we have so much in common. It was just like, okay, is she my sister from another mister? I don't get it. So number one, she lives in New Mexico. Now this was years ago, but I lived 5 or 6 years in New Mexico when my dad was in the service. We're both in Woven. She is my Woven sister, and we are both veterans. And so I just think that, you know, it's interesting to know that we both like to laugh and have a good time. Laughter, I think, is one of the best medicines you can take.
Absolutely.
And so without further ado, Ms. Jen Zappone, welcome to Sisters in Service.
Thank you so much, Kat. Thanks for having me today.
Of course. So I know that you grew up in Pennsylvania and you are a huge Pittsburgh sports team fan. Now she said any, that includes what? Football,
hockey, and baseball.
Pittsburgh doesn't have a basketball team, do
they? They do not. I lived in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, which is where the Pittsburgh Steelers have their annual summer training camp. And of course, when they won their 4 Super Bowls. So I absolutely bleed black and gold. And I root for the Pirates because I even remember when they won a World Series, which has been like half my life ago. But it's definitely ingrained. I'm definitely a Pittsburgh girl.
Well, I have to tell you, and this is going to date me too, but back in the day, so let me backtrack. I started watching football to get closer to my dad. I knew nothing about football. Absolutely. My father would make me go find stuff he didn't own just to get me out of the room. Okay. And I come back, I'm like, oh, I didn't find those red slippers, Dad. And he's like, oh, okay. But I remember it was always the Cowboys and the Steelers.
Yes.
In the Super Bowl. And I always rooted for the Steelers because they look like such badasses. Okay. In those
we are. Yeah.
I was like, oh, you got the little goody 2 shoes over here. Now you got these guys. I'm rooting for those guys because I like their uniforms better. And I didn't know squat about football, so I'm just saying.
I was the child. I have 2 younger brothers, and I was the oldest one. So I would make my brothers go out and pass football. So we would pretend to be Terry Bradshaw, and Lynn Swan, and John Stallworth.
Yes.
And my brother to this day tells me I threw the best spiral out of all 3 of us. So
wow,
that's a pretty dedicated fan.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I still watch football to this day. I still don't know what a pass play and all that other stuff is, but I do know a lot more than I used to. I'm just saying. So you moved from Pennsylvania to New Mexico. Why New Mexico?
Got married, ex-husband.
Okay, that's a good.
we got married in 96. We moved to New Mexico, had 2 kids, and got divorced. And I didn't even hadn't been west of the Mississippi until that point in time. So it was a brand new culture shock for me to live out here.
I loved New Mexico when I was there.
It's gorgeous.
That's the reason I don't like cold weather. I spent 6 years in New Mexico. There was no snow in New Mexico unless you went to the mountains. There was no spring, summer, fall, winter. There was spring and there was summer. And then you went back to spring.
Essentially, yes. Absolutely. Some nights get a little chilly because we're high desert.
Yes, right.
So the nights can dip down, which everybody's always surprised. Well, you live in the desert. Yes, but I'm at 4,000 feet in altitude, so it gets a
Yeah.
little cold sometimes.
I remember summers where we would go whole summers and not wear shoes. We would be barefoot or flip-flops the whole time. Now, this was a long time ago, 70, 80 years ago,
Oh, come on. Come on.
But do you remember those days though, when you just didn't wear shoes? I mean, it was amazing. So let's get back on track because we could sit here and just dish all day.
All day.
But you were an Army reservist and for 12 years. You went into the Army because ... I
had two reasons. One, I was 17, oldest child, had to find a way to pay for college. Ironically, my high school sat right across the street from the Army Reserve units, but it started off with, I've got a way to pay for college. And then I embraced the culture. I embraced my service for all the time that I was in the reserves.
And as if that's not enough, she is a badass in the information technology field. But I also noticed that you are with Toastmasters International. How did you get involved with that?
That's a great story as well. It started off when I was in college. I had a professor who made us go evaluate 5 live speeches. She offered that you could go to church. And at the time, it wasn't, my spiritualness was lacking, if you will. And I was like, I have to sit through a whole sermon to evaluate 5 live speeches. And I was a Catholic girl, so God knows how long those services might be at this point in my life. And I remember that thought process. The other thing she mentioned was Toastmasters. And the company I was temping at just happened to just start a Toastmaster club. I went and I was hooked. I became one of the founding members, and that was in Pennsylvania. So I was in that club for 5 years. And then when I moved to New Mexico, it took me a little bit, but once I got started, I've been in New Mexico Toastmaster clubs for 22 years now. I absolutely love it. I've learned how to communicate, public speaking. I always tell the story. I was really quiet and shy when I joined the military, but back in high school that nobody knew me. So to be able to get up on stage and to meet people like you and to be able to talk more, it really has given me a ton of confidence in my life. So I've
you out of your shell a little bit, but you won a great award with them, like one of the highest awards you can get in Toastmasters.
It's the highest level that they offer you. And yes, I achieved that award.
You go through Toastmasters so we're going to talk about, we can't go any further without talking about Woven, the Women Veterans National. I can't even say it.
Women's Veteran Network? Is that what we're doing?
That one. No, not the Women Veterans International. I don't know what I was trying to say.
You're mixing up that with Toastmasters. We're just merging the two.
So how, when you first heard about it, so first of all, let me caveat by saying this, is that Jen is one of our rock stars. She started off as a group member. She went into peer leader training, became a peer leader train, and then now she's a trainer, and she has been just rock solid from day one. Now, what do I mean by rock solid? So I'm one of those people that if I say I'm going to do something or I'm going to be somewhere, I do it and I'm there, regardless of how I feel or whatever. And I feel as though Jen is like that. She's just, hey, I'm going to do this. And she does it. So how has it been with Woven?
Here's what Woven gave me. And I've used this phrase before. Woven gave me my veterancy back. And I say it that way because of being an Army reservist, especially in the time period I was, we were looked down that we weren't real military. History has shown we can get caught up in the war and we can get killed and our blood can bleed just like everybody else. But it took me Woven to go back and realize that. I remember being in a stands one time during my son's football game before I found Woven. And my daughter saying, Mom, you're a veteran, stand up. I'm like, no, I'm not. Now I embrace it and I'm the first one on my feet. That's what I would tell people, that you have a community, you're a veteran, you deserve, your voice deserves to be heard. And you need the recognition that all of us are here. We all have this commonality. It's very hard for a lot of us, especially me. I am still shy that I don't want to walk into a room where I don't know anybody. But if you find that least common denominator, it will get you out of your shell. And then you find people that you shared experiences with. You find closet Steeler fans. You find coaches out there. You find all walks of life. You've got to get out there and meet with us and find this network that you never need.
I've talked with other reservists who have said the same thing, that they felt other people, either active duty or veterans, just didn't believe that they were really veterans. And, any uniform, if you wear a uniform, whether it's Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Reserve Guard, you're a veteran.
I embrace that now. It took me a little bit to get there and realize that I signed that blank check for my government, just like everybody else did.
So let's go back a little bit. So Jen was diagnosed with a brain tumor. When did you find out you had the brain tumor? And then what was your initial reaction? And did you have that gut instinct that something was wrong?
Let me see if I could answer this in the order. I found out I had a brain tumor in April of 2016. I had been battling a bunch of sicknesses since 2009. So the journey was a long, arduous journey, if you will, of trying to find what the answers were. I can remember the day I found out about the brain tumor. I had been looking about a week or two before. I'd been looking online. I dumped all of my symptoms that were in different boxes because I'd been diagnosed with like 10 different things. I dumped them out. And however I approached the Google gods that day, evidently I asked the right question, because what popped up was the silhouette of what I looked like. It had a picture of a female that had body fat right around the waist and the groin area, a hump on my back. I had flushed features. I had a lot of weight around my swollen face. If you looked at the symptoms, I had 28 out of 30 of them. And the only two I didn't have were prostate issues.
Oh, okay. Yeah. NA.
Yeah, I know. I was like, you sure I don't have that too? Because I have all these other ones. But what that picture was of a lady that had Cushing's disease. And Cushing's disease is caused by a tumor that creates excess cortisol in your system. So it's similar to steroid poisoning, if you will. When I took that to my primary care doctor, I said, hey, what about this? I'd never, ever been tested for cortisol. I had walked into that office and I was sitting there. I hadn't even met him yet. He walked in the door. He had a stack of books about a mile high underneath his arm and said, you realize you have Cushing's disease, right? And I was like, no, I had no idea, but thank you for the diagnosis. Turns out that it is caused by a tumor that could be on your pituitary gland in your brain, your adrenal gland on your kidney, or some independent source floating around in your body. They didn't have a likelihood of where it might be, but he was very determined that I went to get tested because he said, your life expectancy from now is about 5 years. I don't know how long you've had this tumor. If we don't take it out or don't find the source of it, you're going to steadily deteriorate, basically go crazy and possibly commit suicide. I walked out. It was a rainy day in Las Cruces, which we're talking desert. So you know how rare that is.
Yes.
Getting Cushing's disease, it turns out it's even rarer than a rainy day in Las Cruces. But it was raining and I walked out and I remember calling a good friend of mine and saying, hey, I might have a brain tumor. I'm so excited. That might be it. But thankfully, it was a friend that understood that, because who gets excited that they might have a brain tumor? So that's how I found out 7 years. When I look back and start putting all the symptoms together, I think it started right around 2008, that it took that long for me to find out what the source of it was.
So when it starts to settle in, the diagnosis, did your mood change? I mean, did you just say, because at first you're like, yes, I have a diagnosis. And you're like, oh crap, it's a stupid tumor.
It didn't hit, honestly, until I went to the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I talked with a neurosurgeon. And what he said to me was that we have a 50-50 chance that removing this tumor is going to solve your issues. And keep in mind, those issues included weight gain, hypertension. I had diabetes that was onset, had no symptoms of it, all of a sudden had diabetes. I had high blood pressure, swelling, joint pain, knee pain, muscle weakness. I was on a walker at 45. About the time I could barely get out of bed. I needed help getting in and out of the car or the bed. I just very drained, exhaustion. Gosh, I had sleep apnea. I had a kidney disease. I had gout in my hands for like 3 solid years. I had gout in my hands. And I'm in this office going, okay, well, it can't be any worse than I already have. So we've got to take a chance to remove it. And so 50-50, I'm going to go with, okay, we're going to do it. Then he says, well, this tumor is sitting right next to your carotid artery in your brain. So here's your risk. First one, we could hit the carotid artery, you could bleed out and die, and there's nothing we can do. Second one is you can get meningitis because they go up through the nose to take out the brain tumor. That whole line, that cliche that you pay through the nose to get it out, that was me. Yeah, that was me. I paid through the nose.
That's a good one. I like
Thank
that.
you. Yeah.
She's here all week, folks.
Yeah, I am. And it was also all in my head. Just saying. Just saying. So I could get meningitis, I could get pneumonia, or maybe I could be okay. So what happened, they operated August 30th, 2016. And a week later, I contracted pneumonia and I was in a coma for 10 days.
So did they bring you out of the coma or did you come out of the coma yourself?
I'm a little fuzzy on that. The story goes, because of course I was in said coma, I remember waking up and being very, very disoriented. Looking back, I've had my mother, who was there with me, tell me that they didn't think I was going to make it. They were asking how soon they could bring all the family around because they didn't think I was going to pull out of it. When I woke up, nobody told me about being in a coma. They ask you these orientation questions like, what day is it? And all I could think of, I don't know, September 11th. It sounds like a good day. A lot happened on that day. Turns out it was September 12th, so close enough.
Wow.
And they send people in to test everything. My memory of it is every hour there was somebody new. There was an occupational therapist, there's a physical therapist, there's the nephrologist, there was the brain doctor, there
every
was the
ologist you can think of is coming in.
Yeah. And I had no shame at this point. For your listeners, I don't need.
You're just trying to get better. Yeah,
you're just trying to get better. Yeah. So it was really funny at some point in this process because they'd lift you up. You know, they check your legs and everything. And with everybody coming in and out, I started hearing this buzzing and hearing music. And I'm like, somebody left their cell phone. And my mother, I can still picture her face, thought I was crazy. She said, there's no cell phone, there's no music. I said, are you sure? I can hear it. And I made them rip the covers off, her and the nurse, Maria, rip the covers off, and there's no cell phone. And I'm asking this question, okay, I hear something. And thankfully, there was a brain doctor standing right beside me in the back. And she goes, it's normal to have audio hallucinations. I said, are you serious? I never knew such a thing existed. And she goes, well, I can give you medicine for it. I said, I'm looking at IVs coming out the kazoo. And
you're like, right.
Yeah, like I don't need anything else. And I listened to Johnny Cash, Ghost Riders in the Sky for the next 36 hours.
Okay, folks. She is also a huge Johnny Cash fan. So is that a coincidence or what? Okay.
That's what I was thinking. It didn't bother me at all.
You're like, I can listen to this.
I was okay with that. If it would have been rap or Eminem, no offense to anybody, I don't know if I could have handled it. Why it was that song, I have not given it enough thought to understand why it was that song. But that's the song I heard for the next 36 hours.
So you get better, you come out of the hospital. I'm sure you probably had some initial care, someone who does that type of thing, or a parent, like your mom. What was your recovery like after that point? Because some people say, going through the surgery and all that other stuff was hard, but then the recovery part was more difficult.
That's accurate. And the recovery part really didn't happen for another 2 years. So the initial 5 months after the surgery, I was in and out of the hospital every 6 weeks. I couldn't keep anything down. I would be throwing up. I'd go into the hospital. They'd say it was Like one time it was a urinary infection. One time it was low minerals. One time it was something else. And I was very weak, if you can imagine. So I was weak going into the surgery, a week in a coma and coming out of it. It was really tough to move or get around. And all these hospital visits just took it down even more. I ended up in skilled nursing right around November of that year because I spent Thanksgiving in a skilled nursing facility and slowly started coming out of it. So that was 17. When it really hit was the beginning of 2018. My suspicion is that all of the hormones decided to play nice because the healing
we
process.
Just get along.
I don't know why it took y'all so long. Just saying. But right around that date was all of a sudden I lost 130 pounds. I was no longer diabetic. All my symptoms that I mentioned earlier disappeared. And the only thing I have left is adrenal insufficiency. So I no longer create my own cortisol. I am so blessed. I am no longer on a walker. My gout disappeared. My kidneys have been working fine. Sleep apnea is gone. I can't even express to you every day sometime. I'll get up and I'll go somewhere. I'm like, oh my God, look how fast. I feel like Speedy Gonzalez and I'm just walking through the house. My son teases me. He says, there's no warning system anymore. You don't have your walker going.
Like she's coming, yeah. She's coming. Stop
she's
it.
Coming, exactly.
So I know that your life changed. What kind of healthy things have you incorporated into your life since then? One is rest. I embrace sleep. I think that we glorify being busy a lot. And we think I just got 4 hours of sleep last night. Oh, well, it was me. Okay, why do they say that? Oh, I only need 4 hours. You just want to punch them in the throat when they say that. I do. I'm like, I need 9. I'm okay with that. Right. I laugh a lot more. I mean, I always did. So I think that a lot of my, I don't want to call it success, but I do praise the recovery for finding a healthy, positive attitude of going through it. Like making the pay through the nose jokes, or this is where stubborn is good. Persistence is good. Yes. I can't tell you that there was any one thing that I focused on or thought of, but it was, I'm going to get through this next moment. Then I'm going to get through this next moment. And maybe the one after that. I just stuck to it. So I do a lot of that. I don't do as much exercise as I would like to, but I'm getting there. And I just get itty bitty stronger every single day. And one thing that I would tell people that are healing is you have to realize that healing is incremental. So yes, I absolutely had the thought that I would go in for brain surgery. They would take it out and everything would start clicking, and it didn't. And that was frustrating. I find sometimes that it's when you're in recovery, it's like you take 2 steps forward and 4 steps back. And then you're like, oh, I was doing so well. And then you make some changes and you make those steps forward. And then you're like, oh, I thought I was doing so good. But you just have to keep those steps forward, because if you weren't taking the steps forward, that means you're not getting better. The steps forward means every time you move forward, you're making progress. And it doesn't matter whether you have a brain tumor, you're getting over something, or maybe stuff is just really not good in your life, that you're so overwhelmed that you just feel like you're not going to make it to the next day. Is that, would you call it stubbornness, that tenacity, that don't quit, which I find a lot of veterans have. Oh, you're not beating me. Oh, I don't think so. And it doesn't work for everybody. And I know that, but it's that self-talk that, okay, just breathe, just get through this moment. Okay, let's get through this next minute, this next hour, this next day, this next week. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, I feel so much better. But we forget about that journey. You know what I mean? You're like, oh, I'm better. Yo, I had that. And I'm, but we forget about how that journey, and sometimes that journey changes you as a person, hopefully for the better. Agree. I hope it did in my case. And I think the other thing we do is we have a good day. I would wake up and have this really good day, and I would overdo it. And somebody would say, well, you've got to, and I've thought about it. I'm like, well, why would I
why would I overdo it? Why would I do all this stuff? And I think because those good days didn't come along very often. So I tried to squeeze everything I
as
could.
much as you could into it. Yeah.
And then you'd overdo it and you'd pay for it for the next 3 weeks.
Right. I always tell people I've been in the fitness industry, and when they're coming back from an injury or something, and they'll say, oh, well, what do I do when I'm not with you? Can I do this? Can I do this? And I said, if you want to do something, if you say, I want to walk a mile, cut it in half. I want to walk a half a mile, cut it in half. Because you'll do that, you get that accomplishment, you get back, you're like, yes, but you haven't overextended yourself. We think we can do a mile, and we probably can, but should you?
Probably not. And it's very hard to create the habits, and when you talk about looking back, I remember one of the reasons I had gone to the Mayo Clinic, I met in 2014. And there's a lot of stories between 2009 and 2016 that I could go into and would be here for like 3 more hours.
Okay, are we doing a Jen Zappone like web series?
Yeah, series. Yeah. But I think that when I went there, I went to the Mayo Clinic because I was trying to figure out I wasn't losing any weight. I have an ARC trainer. I was on it for half an hour every freaking morning. I had it set up at a high level, and my doctors are looking at me going like, yeah, that's all you. You're not doing something right. I'm like, I'm not doing something wrong, right? One of the things that I learned is that you have to keep asking the questions. Don't give up asking the questions. Even if it's Google, you've got to be your own advocate. Get into Google. And it's not like I know the doctors have all of this knowledge, but they're human too. And they're going to focus on the shiny object, just like we are. I had 2 kidney biopsies, and I laugh. I'm like, take another little piece of my kidney. Why don't you? But there's solid results for the kidney.
Right.
So, well, that looks like there's my shiny object. So I'm going to go for it. And you have to, you know your body better than anybody else. That's what you have to remember. You live in it. They only see you for like 15 minutes, if you're lucky, every 6 months.
Yeah, being your own advocate is important. Doctors hate me because I'm like, well, how come this, and why this, and what about this, and have you thought about this, and they're like, yeah, whatever, get out the door, because I feel like it's necessary,
Absolutely.
And I've had to step in and help my mom, because my mom comes from an era where the doctor was right about everything. And, she's got a lot going on health-wise. And I'll say, Mom, one of them being a heart issue. I'll say, Mom, you went to your heart doctor. What did they say? And she goes, oh, he says, I'm fine. I go, you have a heart condition. You're not fine. So you have to really ask those types of questions. So last but not least, what would you tell someone other than being your own advocate for someone who's just not doing well health-wise? Is it keep asking questions, being your own health advocate? Is there anything else you would suggest?
I had about 8 of those. That Toastmaster thing you talked about earlier?
Yes.
One of the things that, yes, stay curious. Just stay curious. Don't look at it like you're trying to solve all of your problems, but be curious about it. Focus on what could go right. I tell the story about the 50-50 chance, and my odds of getting Cushing's disease are like 1 in 1,000,000 and 2 or something like that. But you have to focus on what could go right, not everything that could go wrong. Right. So focus is a really good thing to have, and that helps you shift where you're looking at. One of them, the other one I have is bet on yourself, even if it's against all the odds. You got to bet on you. Don't let anybody tell you different. You know your own odds. Bet on yourself no matter what. Don't let pity parties last more than 3 minutes.
I like that one.
I set a timer. It's really easy. It's really easy to go down that rabbit hole. And then you're so negative. And it's really easy to make the excuse that you're health and you take time off. And I did it, and I'd have to stop and go, wait, nope. What do you have? You're done being sorry for yourself. Go take a step.
Yeah. The gratitude,
Yes.
what's, when you said what's gone right, people say, oh, well, this went wrong and this went, okay, what went right? And you have to look at it from that point of view sometimes.
You do. And when you look back, a lot of us look back and regret and like, well, I wish I could have done that. But if you look back in a positive way, look how far you've come. And my kids are great reminders of that. My son is like, Mom, remember when you said you wanted a wheelchair? And he said, no way. And I remember that. He's like, you're not getting a wheelchair for this house. You're going to do something, right? And he reminds me all the time, and so does my daughter, that you couldn't do this back then. Look at all that you're doing now. And
that's an amazing story.
It's a great reminder that, that valley was pretty steep, but look, the mountain you climbed afterwards.
Right. Now you're looking down and going, wow, look what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I love that story, Jen. Just the fact that you're here and that I get to know you, I feel very blessed that I get to know who you are as a person. And I hope that if anyone out there is listening, that they've learned a little something about being in that deep, deep valley, looking at that huge mountain above you and saying, I'm not sure I can, but taking those baby steps one day at a time, 1 minute at a time, 1 hour at a time, and realizing that you can get up that mountain. Now, it might not be in a day, might not even be 5 days, but you're going to. Do you find it difficult to come up with content ideas for your podcast? Or perhaps you've gotten stuck during an interview with a guest where you just have nothing to ask anymore. Try Poddex today. Poddex is the best all-in-one podcast idea generation tool. You get everything from episode ideas to interesting conversation starters for interviews, engaging discussions for your live streams, and even social media content ideas. With this tool, you don't have to spend weeks trying to come up with content for an episode or unique questions for your guests. Just shuffle the cards and pick one at random, hit the record button, and get started. Now you can make better content, have more fun while you're at it, and get your viral moment, all with Poddex. Head over to poddex.com and use code C4C.